Hey everybody, it's LavenderTowne. Today I'm going to be doing a challenge where I turn the 5 love languages into monster designs. Now, I used to do this all the time where I'd take something sort of like cute and positive, like a toy or something like that, and then try to change it into something scary and monstrous. So I'm just doing the same concept with this concept of love languages. It actually comes from a relationship book that was published in 1992, but I feel like this whole idea about love languages has kind of become popularized again through like social media and TikTok. The first love language I'm going to be turning into a monster design is the language of touch. So this could be anything like holding hands, just putting a hand on the shoulder or the back, just kind of like any sort of physical indication of affection. So in order to make this a monster design, I really wanted to give off that feeling of something being suffocating or smothering. I feel like that's a good like dark side version of this. And so I really went all over the place with the hands. I wanted to kind of make them almost look like fallen angels or something, because this is like, it's a positive, lovely thing that's turned into a monster. So I thought that would be a fun sort of like mythological archetype. So I ended up giving her these like hand-shaped wings almost, and I just really replicated that image over and over of hands grabbing. Whereas where her actually hands are, or where they should be, is now just sort of like an ooze, to give you that sort of like creepy feeling of like, let's say when someone like grabs your arm or whatever and you don't expect it, or when someone like reaches out and touches you but their hand is like weirdly clammy. I just kind of wanted to give off that whole energy, just to really get into the dark side of this concept. I decided for the color palette, I was actually going to go with like shading first and highlighting. I really wanted this to be very much about form, because you know that's what you are sensing when you touch something. So maybe that's a bit too deep into the concept, but I really wanted to commit to it, and I decided to go pretty limited with the color palette. I wanted her to be all about her silhouette and her form. And I ended up going with sort of like this white, black, and purple kind of aesthetic. Originally I was going to go with mostly like a warm pink, but I felt like that was almost going too cute. So I brought in some purple just to give it a bruisier, creepier kind of feeling with these little tiny highlights of red. I think that she definitely has a very spooky vibe, especially with the way that you can't really see her face, and the way that her like kind of hair is really just, you know, multiple hands sort of reaching around the shape of her face, so you can't even really see what she looks like or what expression she has. I think she looks quite creepy. I almost kind of went with like a sci-fi aesthetic there for a minute, but I kind of pulled back on that a little bit. I definitely think she looks very unsettling. So this is my monster version of the love language of touch. For my next monster design, I wanted to do the love language of acts of service. This one's kind of an oddball one, but it actually makes a lot of sense once you think about it. It basically means that the person who this is the love language for would feel most loved by somebody doing a chore for them or taking something off their hands. You know, like mowing the lawn or doing their laundry if it really needs to get done. That's the thing that works best for them. So for my acts of service monster archangel thing that I'm creating here, I really wanted to have this like two-headed character, one of which is stuck kind of permanently in a bow, and then I decided to actually have like an eye on the top of the head of the bowing individual. You can assume that there's also an eye on the top of the head of the other one, but to make a monster design of this concept, I really wanted to pair two ideas together, one of which of course is that it's disingenuous to be serving someone all the time if you're in a relationship with them. You're not showing your true self. You're kind of acting like they're your boss, or you're sort of like subjugating yourself overly. And then on top of that is the idea of like doing things for like ulterior motives, which the bowing head kind of represents. So I wanted to pair these two ideas together because I thought that they both worked for this idea of the dark side of acts of service. And I really went biblically accurate angel with this. I was putting lots of eyes everywhere and just generally making them quite creepy. I did this little arc halo around the top head, and then I wanted to show them kind of holding in their hands this heart. It's almost kind of gave me like a labyrinth kind of vibe, where there's a famous quote that I can't perfectly remember, but it's basically like, if you do everything that I say, then I'll be your slave. So it's this idea that like actually they're kind of controlling the whole situation when it appears that they're just just trying to do things for you, but actually it's a way of exerting control. This is the idea that I had overall for this character, and I really designed the outfit based on like butler outfits. I looked up a few. They're very, very typically like the same. It's just like a black and white suit, usually with white gloves. That's a huge aspect. I also gave him some like bandages around the chin. I almost wanted to make it look like he's being forced to smile. I don't know if that comes across actually. I might have tweaked that I might tweak that in the future, but overall I was really happy with this character. I feel like he's very creepy looking and interesting. If you can think of a name for him, please let me know. I haven't had you guys name a character in a while. I think that would be fun. But yeah, here's my design for the monster of acts of service. Next up, we have words of affirmation. Now, this is basically like compliments. So if you're the type of person who feels most loved when someone is directly saying like, I love you, I adore you, you're beautiful, that kind of thing, then your love language might be words of affirmation. So for this character design, I really liked the idea of going a little edgier with it. My first instinct was to create this sort of like suave, poet-like character, but I wanted to kind of push against that and try to do something a little different, a little more visual. So I thought this idea of this really beautiful archangel who has tattoos of words all over her body, and it sort of tells the story of someone who is being sort of like overly effusively affectionate with their language, but then it sort of turns into something again like sort of controlling and sort of spooky. This is very rooted in reality. I think people get love bombed a lot in toxic relationships, and I think it starts with sort of this like effusive string of compliments and sort of over dedication to the relationship really early, that kind of thing. So that's kind of the story I wanted her tattoos to tell. And also I just really wanted her to, like, her face is completely obscured because you're just supposed to be listening to her voice and reading what is written on her. I also ended up giving her a little feather behind the ear just to sort of nod back to my original idea of this like traditional old school poet. I wanted to sort of marry those concepts together, and I wanted to use these like cool gray tones. It's almost like there's almost like a bridal vibe, like bridal lingerie vibe to her outfit. I started just doing things that I thought would look cute. I'm not gonna lie. But yeah, I think that there's something kind of interesting about having a character completely covered in tattoos and then having that sort of represent this idea of the words of affirmation. Honestly, I do think that like if somebody's complimenting you way too much and way too strongly too early, it is a bit of a warning sign. You gotta be careful, because yeah, sometimes that can be, especially if someone doesn't know you well, that can be kind of concerning. But yeah, I think this concept is one of my favorites. I think she looks so interesting, and it made me want to do more heavily tattooed characters, even though hers are basically just like writing. And yeah, I don't know. I think it's very intriguing, especially because you can't see her face. It really forces you to focus on the other parts of the character design. Here's that feather I mentioned. I think it's just a fun last little nod to this idea of sort of like the poet who sort of tricks you into something that you weren't maybe mentally prepared for. And her wings are actually made out of speech bubbles. I don't know. I thought it looked kind of cool. This is my monster design for words of affirmation. Next up, we have gifts. Now, this is probably the most controversial of the original 5. I see a lot of people who first get into like the concept of love languages being like, it can't be gifts, or it's the worst one if your favorite way to receive love is by receiving presents. I don't have strong feelings about it, but I definitely knew what I wanted to do for this. I got heavily inspired by like a lot of, greed-based monster designs, and I also couldn't stop thinking of No Face, or Kaonashi from Spirited Away. He is such a great classic example of this idea of a character who appears to be trying to give you something, but there's clearly some ulterior motives and something is quite wrong with this character. In the story of Spirited Away, it becomes quickly apparent what he actually wants and why he's giving away all this gold, if it even is gold. If you haven't watched Spirited Away by now, I don't know what you're doing, but you should probably get on that. I'm still hesitant to spoil it just because there's a chance, But anyway, for this character design, I really wanted to create this amazing sort of like intricate monarch design. I ended up giving him a crown with, the very kingly fluff on it, but then the top, the sort of spires of the crown are actually like shards of like jewels or broken glass, and I completely obscured his face again, kind of like the words of affirmation design. In this one, I wanted to obscure it so that you don't know why he's giving you things. I think that that's always a little unsettling. Maybe it's cynical, but I think that when somebody is giving you things and you don't know why and you don't know them well, that's also kind of spooky. I guess any like overt affection when you don't know someone well is a little spooky, so that's an easy way to slip this into a more negative frame and more monstrous rather than just something that's positive. I gave him white gloves as well, and he has more traditional angel wings, but I studded them with red rubies, and I feel like rubies are so great because they really speak to opulence while also looking like crusted dried blood. It's just absolutely fantastic visually, I think. And as sort of a nod to No Face, as well as just the general idea of like consumption, I have like this long monstrous tongue sticking out under this veil. I also did a little like, it's almost like a necklace kind of thing, this adornment on the front of the face. Hopefully you guys can see what I was trying to do there, but I'm trying to give him sort of a diabolical fanged smile with the rubies dangling off this little chain that hangs in front of his face. Hopefully that comes across. And I made him perfectly symmetrical. Again, this is just another good way to make something a little unsettling because natural things aren't perfectly symmetrical. So this is my monster design for gifts. Okay, we're down to the final love language, and this is quality time. I put this one to the end because honestly, I thought it would be the hardest to turn negative. I mean, it has quality right in the title, but I definitely feel like I figured it out. So quality time, it's kind of self-explanatory, but if you're the type of person who would feel most loved by just like going on a date and getting to hang out with someone who's focusing on you and really paying attention and really, like spending time with you in an active way, if that's the thing that would like make you feel most loved, then your love language is probably quality time. So in order to turn this monstrous, I sort of pondered it for a while, but eventually I ended up with this idea, again, almost of like Touch's suffocating level of physical affection. This is sort of a suffocating, sort of sloth-like inspiration to not do anything or to hold you in place or to take your time from you. These are all the concepts that I sort of ended up going for. The metaphor is a little bit less direct than some of my other designs, but I ended up liking her a lot. I definitely think that the clocks on the hands, the palms maybe is a little bit too obvious of a metaphor. I might have removed them or made them a little bit less in your face if I was to do this again, but overall I'm really happy with this idea of, again, like it's sort of the opposite of the gift giving one where it's this idea of consumption. This is like someone's taking so much of your time that it's sort of like it's sort of rotting away. Rot is really the vibe of this one, and I really wanted it to have this meticulous inking along the topography of this flesh, I guess. This one ended up looking quite creepy. And yeah, I sort of painstakingly just drew around all of the little lines and curves of the sludge that's sort of coming over their skeleton. I feel like it's hard to tell if this is receding and pulling away or if it's covering them, but I think either way it's quite spooky. And with this one I definitely wanted to keep a really specific kind of color palette, focused on this extremely bright red that I started with as my like mask base. And I put these little socks on them and like gym shorts. At first I was like, what am I cooking here? Like I didn't know my own reasoning, but then I realized, oh, you know, it makes sense. It's like this idea that they're like keeping you home with them, not allowing you to sort of explore, experience other things. And I think there's no better way to sort of show that visually than loungewear, because obviously you're not going anywhere. And of course, obligatory, I put a little clock hands in the eye of this character. And then I was finished up with the quality time monster. So I haven't done one of these monster design videos in a while. I had so much fun with it. I hope you guys liked it. Please let me know if you have any name ideas for these guys. I'm going to include them in a future video, the ones I pick. And let me know what you think your love language is. I think it's a fun idea. So yeah, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Huge thank you to all of my patrons, including Aspen, Rayons, Vorpal Matt, Brandon Stark, Jamie, CB, Ted, Crosby F, Lucy Amajiki, Finn Must Die, Live, Salty Jackrabbit, Noose Milk, Raven's Crow, Zocelot, Teal Music, Jabber Dabber Doo, Gender Was Stolen, Kay, Kadaria, Deadly Nightshade Art, Astral Fox Art, The Expressive Poker Face, Tsubaki, Michael Lavally, Cutie Pie, Ruin Raincrow, Ice Cream Pal, Cola, JJ Jade, and of course, blah 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 blah.